Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for today's event with Malicia. The name of the event is Four Core Pillars for Health and Longevity: Nutrition, Exercise, Movement, and Recovery. The event is brought to you by the New York Metro Women of our UFR Global Women's Network. My name is Luisa. I'm the co-chair of the group. Malicia is the owner and founder of Mindset Nutrition Coaching. She helps women over 40 change their bodies, shift their mindset, ditch fat diets, and build body confidence through a sustainable, highly personalized habit and evidence-based framework. Malicia is a precision nutrition level 2 master nutrition and health coach. She has 15 years of experience as a certified Mad Dog spinning instructor, Kaiser cycling instructor, Schwinn M-Power cycling instructor, and TRX instructor. She has a master's degree in higher education admin from the UFR's Warner School of Education and is mental health first aid certified. She's a member of the Women in Fitness Association, Indoor Cycling Association, and a master indoor cycling coach for local gyms. She teaches weekly group fitness classes and bi-weekly nutrition and wellness workshops for the YMCA of Greater Rochester. After our presentation, we'll open the floor for questions with Malicia. You may submit questions in the chat box throughout the presentation, but we'll get to it at the end.
Awesome. Thank you, Luisa. Thank you, Barbara. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you to the New York Metro Women. I'm very excited to be here with everyone as a presenter today. You know, I worked at U of R for 21 years prior to transitioning to my full-time job in health and wellness and nutrition. And when I worked at U of R the last 6 years was in alumni relations, and one of my jobs was supporting the New York Metro Women. So it's wonderful to now be a volunteer for them and partner with them. So thank you all very, very much. Get comfortable. This is your time. Grab your water, grab your snack, grab your lunch, stand, stretch, pace, do whatever works for you and make this time about you. Barbara said we will be taking questions at the end, so feel free to drop them in the chat. And at the end, if we are tight on time, I'm happy to also stay on a little bit longer and try to address questions if we run out of time. But quick disclaimer, just to let you guys know, I am a qualified nutrition professional, but I am not a doctor. So everything we're talking about today is really about big picture, broad, general public type of information that apply to most people. So the four core pillars that we're going to be talking about today are nutrition, exercise, movement, and recovery. And I chose these specifically because we have some of the most direct control over them. They're sort of the big rocks or the low-hanging fruit where we can start to make progress. And I also chose these because they're interconnected and they create a really strong health foundation that's going to carry us forward now and as we age, no matter how old we are. And when I talk about these things, I like to think of them more like a dimmer switch or levers that we are just sort of constantly fine-tuning and moving up and down and adjusting for better balance and to help leverage our needs as we age. So when we do think about aging, and doesn't matter how old you are today, we're all aging, right? So there's lifespan and there's health span. And when we think about longevity, we don't just want to live longer in years, right? Our lifespan, we want to live well. We want health span, right? We want to live in a disease-free state where we can do all the things that we want to do with as few restrictions as possible. And we know that nutrition and lifestyle are some of the best tools that are going to optimize both. Also, because as we age, our minds and bodies do start to change. And some of those changes are due to nutrition, how active or how sedentary we are, hormonal shifts, lifestyle and habit choices, medical conditions, medications. So there's lots of reasons that we can start to take more control over the aging process. Now, as we age, we know that so many of the symptoms of aging are actually things that are within our control, more so than we think, because a lot of aging is sort of just a byproduct or a result of an accumulation of lifelong lifestyle habits. So if we think about the things that we can control, and start to leverage those and focus on those and put our energy there instead of the things we can't control, that's where we can start to make some progress and impact both health and lifespan at any age, right? So focusing on nutrition and lifestyle, our outlook, our mindset, our perceptions versus genetics or how we were raised or the fixed environments that we are surrounded by. So one of the overarching concepts that I just want to touch on before we get into these 4 core pillars is something called total daily energy expenditure. And I'm talking about this to sort of set the stage because often we hear calories in, calories out when we look at weight loss specifically. And while this isn't a session about weight loss or fat loss, TDEE, the calories out portion, really impacts the 4 core pillars, and the 4 core pillars impact total daily energy expenditure. And what this is the estimated amount of energy that your body uses every day simply performing basic physical functions, from breathing and digestion to me talking with my hands to all the movement that we do. Now, the thing about TDEE is that it is variable, it's really hard to measure, and it is always going to be estimated. You can go online. I put a little link here. You can go online and get an estimation of your TDEE, but just know that it's made up of 4 components. The first big component, the orange section here, this is our basal metabolic rate, or our BMR, and that's 60 to 70% of TDEE, or calories out. And BMR is all the work your body does at rest. We don't have direct control over that, right? The next biggest piece of this puzzle is something called NEAT, non-exercise activity thermogenesis. And we're going to talk about movement specifically later. And this really comes into play because this piece of the puzzle is about 15%. And we have a lot of control over that 15%. And that 15% really moves the needle in terms of progress for health and longevity. This is all of the non-structured movement that we do, not planned, purposeful exercise. The third piece of this puzzle or this equation is something called TEF, or the thermic effect of food. And this is the energy or the calories that our body burns while digesting and metabolizing the food we eat. It's about 10% of this equation. So food quality and food quantity does matter for body composition and for health. And then the last piece of this puzzle, which is the smallest piece way up top, is something called exercise activity thermogenesis, or EAT. And that is the structured, planned, purposeful exercise or training we do, right? Going to the gym, playing sports, practicing a game. Now, unfortunately, your EAT is only 5%. That's it. So people who join a gym and think, I'm going to just fix everything and I'm going to work out, it's only 5%. It's not moving the needle as much as you think. It's amazing for health and well-being, and that's why we should do it, but it is only 5%. So I tell you all this because we have some control over calories out, right? And this is important because the 4 pillars directly and indirectly impact this, which directly impacts our body weight, our body composition, our hormonal status, energy and fatigue, performance and movement, sleep, aging, immunity. It affects everything, right? Nothing in our bodies happen in a vacuum or in isolation. So let's get right into the first pillar, which is nutrition. So as we age, nutritional needs start to change. Overall, we will start to need less calories or less energy, but we need more protein. We need better and more hydration. And we also need better quality nutrition and targeted supplementation. Now, I'm not going to specifically address supplements or supplementation at all today, but I will say that as we age, particularly from about age 50 on, we no longer absorb certain vitamins and minerals as well as we used to. And that makes us prone to potential deficiencies. Specifically things like calcium, vitamins D, E, B12, iron, magnesium, and a few other things. So targeted supplementation might start to become relevant. Now, the interesting thing with nutrition is there was a recent study that talked about diets that are high in ultra-processed foods, right? The prepackaged, highly processed kinds of foods. The more higher ultra-processed foods we eat, the higher risk of dementia and poor mental health. And for every 10% increase in ultra-processed foods, that dementia risk increased by 25%, which is pretty significant. So the importance of high quality foods, high quality nutrition really starts to come into play with age. And, I'm going to say as we age and with age, often I'm not putting a number on that because age is kind of relative, right? But the older we are and the older we get, the more meaningful these things start to become. So let's talk a little bit about hydration because that is a part of nutrition that people often forget about. It's not just about the food, but it is about staying hydrated. And hydration matters because it is about 60% of our body is water. And when we're hydrated, everything works better, everything feels better. Our concentration, cognition, memory, bowel function, everything is better. We do get about 20% of hydration through food and beverages. So when we eat fruit, vegetables, soup, smoothies, tea, coffee, juice, milk, it all counts towards hydration. But we still do need to drink enough water. And one indication of hydration is looking at your urine. So if you go to the bathroom, take a look at your urine in the bowl, right? You want your urine to be pale, light yellow, sort of like pale lemonade. As it gets darker, as it starts to get a little stinky, think like apple juice color and darker, your body is potentially becoming more and more dehydrated. So thinking about keeping your body hydrated and charged like a battery throughout the day is really helpful. Now, the other reason this comes into play is that for most people, we can say drink to thirst. That is typically enough for your average person, but dehydration risk increases as we age. There's medications like diuretics or laxatives, chemotherapy, some blood pressure medication, heart and kidney meds. They all can dampen our sense of thirst. And women, particularly women in midlife, start to get a reduced sense of thirst due to hormonal shifts. So menopause, medications, changes in our hypothalamus and our brain because of hormonal changes, all of those things start to impact the part of the brain that regulates fatigue, fluid balance, and thirst. So this means that your drive to thirst might be a bit dampened, even though your body might be dehydrated, right? You're just not feeling physically as thirsty, so you might not be drinking as much as you need. And this is particularly important for anyone who is highly active or engages in high levels of exercise or high intensity exercise, because there are also sex differences in sweat rates and thermoregulation in women, which become even more pronounced with age. So for the most part, drink to thirst is a great general recommendation, but just know that there are sex differences. And when we look at research in this area, like most research, it's done on men, not necessarily on women. And that's starting to change. So again, look at your urine color, stay hydrated. And if you're not feeling thirsty, you might want to just take a few sips of water throughout the day to keep your hydration good. So what are some quick, easy hydration tips? First, keep a reusable water bottle with you at all times. For many people, having a straw really, really helps rather than sipping out of a glass. Another tip that I really like and that I personally do is I keep a water bottle on my nightstand. It's a metal one, so it keeps the water bottle at a good temperature. And the first thing I do when I wake up in the morning is I take a few sips of water. I'm not chugging the water bottle. I'm not downing it all, just a few sips because we're coming off of this overnight fast. We're dehydrated from overnight. So you need some of that water. And my other rule is sort of water before coffee. So I take my few sips. I start making my pot of coffee. While it's brewing, I'm taking a few more sips of water just to start the hydration process. Another way to stay better hydrated is to start to increase your fruit and veggie content because they do have a lot of water. It does help with hydration and it also helps with nutrition. You can flavor your water, mix in some fruit juice, some fruit slices with an infuser. You can drink sparkling water. I love brewing big batches of unsweetened flavored decaf teas and I put them in the fridge. Great way to just stay hydrated without having all the caffeine. And then make sure you're adjusting, right? Based on illness, intense exercise, some medications. If you're somebody that's in high temperatures or high humidity, you might need more hydration than somebody else. And listen to your body because, again, this is going to vary person to person and per activity levels. And often people ask me, well, how much water should I drink, right? And we hear all the time, 8 glasses of water a day. And that's really not a great guideline because some of us are really small, some of us are really big, some of us are incredibly active. So for some people, 8 glasses of 8 ounces of water might be too much. And for other, it's not even going to make a dent. So a better guideline, if you're trying to focus on making hydration a priority, is take your body weight, cut it in half, and drink half of your body weight in ounces of water. And for some people, even that might be a stretch goal. But wherever you can start and make progress, that's what matters. This is not about perfection by any means. So let's talk about the food. When we talk about nutrition, we're often talking about protein, carbohydrates, and fats. And these are our macronutrients. So you might hear people say, oh, I track my macros, or I'm tracking my food, right? These are macros, and these give us energy or calories. And as we age, our macronutrient needs and how we absorb them and metabolize them does change, right? So some foods are mostly one macro. For example, chicken breast is pretty much 98% protein, while other foods are mixed macros, right? Like a whole egg is going to give you protein and some fat. All of these macros provide calories or energy. So protein and carbohydrates each give you 4 calories per gram that you eat. Fat, 9 calories per gram. Alcohol, not officially a macro, it's sort of the unofficial macro, but it does give you energy and calories, and that's 7 calories per gram. And again, when we go back to total daily energy expenditure and that overarching concept of calories out, this is where calories and quantity of calories come into play. So as people start to restrict food or they remove food and food groups, that sort of that equation starts to adapt and metabolism starts to drop. So let's talk specifically about protein. Those of you who know me and any of my clients here know that I preach protein big time because many people are really deficient in protein. We should be getting somewhere in the 20 to 30% of our diet from protein. Now, the RDA guideline is significantly lower. The RDA focuses on about 0.4 grams per pound of body weight. And that came about purely to prevent deficiency and illness and avoid a negative nitrogen balance in the body. It is not optimal and it is not for somebody to thrive. So for example, if you weigh 150 pounds, that's only 60 grams of protein per day, which is really not much. And protein is critical. We need it for everything that your body does. Hundreds of functions rely on protein, from muscle building and strength to hormones, enzymes, neurotransmitters. We need protein. Now, as we age, between the ages of 40 and 80, we lose between 30 to 50% of our muscle mass. This is also where eating enough protein and optimal amounts of protein comes into play because we want to reduce the risk of getting sarcopenia and losing all of that muscle mass. We want to preserve muscles, preserve strength, and maintain a robust metabolism. And if you're highly active, if you're strength training, then protein is even more critical for you to build and maintain muscle mass. Now, the other thing about protein is as we age, we develop something called anabolic resistance, which is when protein synthesis, or how protein gets used, the essential amino acids, how that protein gets used in our body to build and keep us in a state of anabolic building up, that starts to decrease. So we need more protein as we age than when we were younger for the protein to do the same job in our bodies. So the other interesting thing about protein is that we can store other nutrients in our bodies, but we can't store protein. So it's important that not only are we eating enough protein, but we're sort of spreading it out throughout the day so that it's able to do its job from protein synthesis to protein breakdown and keep that steady flow throughout the day. Protein is also one of the most filling foods to eat, and it keeps us full really long, right? We talked about TEF, the thermal effect of food. Well, protein costs our bodies the most to digest and metabolize, upwards of like 30%. So again, if we're looking at metabolism and keeping your body working robustly, protein really matters. Now, when we're talking about, okay, how much protein? We want to focus on a range, right? So on the lower end of the range, 0.7 grams per pound of body weight or pound of ideal body weight if you're overweight or obese. And on the upper range, if you're highly active and you're looking to maintain more muscle and you're strength training, you can look at 1 gram of protein per pound or of body weight or ideal body weight. And if we use our hand as a portion guide, if you look at the palm of your hand in terms of size and the thickness, this is considered 1 portion of protein. And for most people, this is somewhere between 3 and 6 ounces of protein. Right. So women, we want to aim for at least one of these per meal and using snacks throughout the day to top it off. And men, about 2 of these, almost double. So where do we get protein from? There's lots of places you can get protein. And I basically say if it walks, if it flies, if it swims, if it crawls, if it has eyes, it's a great complete protein source. It's got all the essential amino acids and you're getting everything you need from those sources, right? We want to choose lean cuts of meat, poultry. For some people, low fat dairy is going to be a better option than full fat dairy because they might be looking at keeping saturated fat and calories in check. If you're plant-based or fully plant-based, or even just predominantly plant-based, then you might need to eat more plant foods in higher quantities than if you're eating more animal proteins, because plant proteins are considered incomplete, that they don't all have complete amino acids, essential amino acids, but soy products, quinoa, hemp, chia, and buckwheat are considered complete proteins. So if you are plant-based, putting more of those into your diet will help you get what you need. Again, I don't talk a lot about supplements. I think supplements have a time and a place. I focus on food first, but not food always. But I will say a protein powder supplement is a great option for people who struggle to get enough protein or just need some to top it off. I love plant protein. I use plant-based protein because I have gut issues and I can't do dairy-based protein. But protein supplements are also great because you can add them to oatmeal. You can add them to baked goods, to batters, to your smoothies. So it's a great way to just up protein content of foods that might have a little bit lower protein. So there's a little trick that I talk to clients about when you're looking at food, because right now everything is like keto, paleo, high protein, blah, blah, blah. And often just because something says high protein doesn't really mean it's actually high protein. And there is no RDA for high protein, right? It's kind of a marketing gimmick. So one trick that you can do is if you're looking at a food label, take a look at where the protein grams are and then look at your calories. So if you take the protein grams and you tack on a 0, so in this case, protein is 12, we're going to tack on a 0, it's 120. You want that number with the 0 to be equal to or greater than the calories. And if that's the case, you know you have a really good bang for your buck protein source. Now, here, 120 is significantly less than 250. That doesn't mean it's a bad protein source, and it doesn't mean you shouldn't eat it. It just means that this is not what you should be relying on as your protein source. It's a great source of fat, right? There's 18 grams of fat, and every gram of fat has 9 calories. So there's a lot of fat in there, but it is not a great protein source. Now, this is something I would use as a snack or with the meal to help top off my protein and get me to my goal by the end of the day. This trick, by the way, with tacking on a 0 also works for fiber. So if you look at dietary fiber, which is 6, and you look at carbohydrates, which is 17, if you tack on a 0 to the 6, 60, 60 is way more than 17. So it's an awesome fiber source. Make sense? Easy trick. So let's talk about carbohydrates and vegetables. Vegetables are carbohydrates. Your average woman needs a minimum of 120 to 130 grams of carbohydrates simply to function well as a human being. Forget activity and exercise. That's over and above, right? But brain health, basic health, we need carbohydrates. We should aim for 30 to 40% of our diet from quality carbohydrates. And again, there's no like RDA recommendation because it depends, right? Like most things in nutrition, it depends. If you're highly active, especially if you're doing high intensity work, you're probably going to want more carbohydrates. If you are really sedentary, you might want to keep your carbohydrate intake a little bit lower. But carbohydrates are really important because they provide energy, vitamins, minerals, and fiber, and they're really critical for cardiovascular and GI health. They help keep our cholesterol in check. It reduces cancer risk. It can stabilize our blood sugar and insulin control. And it really helps manage weight and body composition. And when we look at carbohydrates and plant foods, most of us aren't getting enough fiber, especially if we're restricting carbohydrates, if we're restricting calories. And for those of us who eat a Western diet or what we call a SAD diet, right, the standard American diet, we're not eating enough plants. So if we're looking at fiber specifically, 25 grams is that like daily minimum. Women are looking to aim to get 30 to 35, men 40 to 45. And if we're eating a vast array of plant foods and a diverse array of foods, colorful things, in adding things into our diet, then you're going to start to work your way up towards getting that fiber. But if you're restricting calories, you're restricting food groups, and you're cutting out carbs for whatever reason, it becomes really hard to hit those goals. So think about what you can add to your diet and what you can eat more of to start to hit those numbers. Again, I said earlier, nothing happens in a vacuum, right? This is where hydration comes into play, because without good hydration, fiber and your gut cannot do a good job. So again, carbs, no RDA guideline, right? The more active you are, the more carbs make sense to add to your diet. And if we're looking at portions, if you take your hand and cup it, what fits in this cupped handful is considered 1 serving of carbohydrates. So women, we want to aim for about 1 cupped handful, men about 2 per meal. And if we're looking at vegetables and you make a fist, 1 fistful of vegetables, which is about a cup, on your plate every day. Again, women, at least 1, men, 1 to 2. Depending on the size of your hand, that cupped handful of carbohydrates is anywhere between a half a cup to maybe 3/4 of a cup. So, a small piece of fruit. If you've got a really giant apple, maybe it's half of the apple, maybe it's half a banana, or 1 slice of bread, or half of an English muffin, half of a baked potato. So thinking about portions comes into play. So where are we getting carbohydrates, and what are high quality carbohydrates, right? We want to eat more whole grains, more unrefined, less processed carbohydrates, because they're slower digesting, they keep us full, they keep us satiated, and then you got the vitamins, the minerals, and the fibers. So everything here, these are all of our grains. Any starchy vegetable is going to start to come into play, and all fruits. The great thing about some of these grains is that you can batch cook them, and you can pre-prep, pre-cook them, put them in an Instant Pot, put them in a cooker or a big pot, make them on a Sunday, throw them in the fridge, and now you've got a day's worth of grains that you can eat to add. And again, thinking about eating the rainbow. How can I add more color? How can I add more fruits and vegetables? How can I add more healthy grains? And one of the handouts that I sent to Sarah that you guys will get afterwards includes sort of a sheet about eating the rainbow and tracking some of those foods. So dietary fat, 25 to 30% of our diet should come from fat from all sources. If you're, 40 plus, many of us started to grow up with the whole fat makes you fat, right? Like everything was fat-free which was replaced with a lot of additives and a lot of extra carbohydrates because everybody feared fat, but now we know better. We need fat. Fat is important because it helps with inflammation. It helps with hormone regulation, brain health, joint cushioning, nervous system health is really important. And when we're looking at fat, most fats are a mix of saturated, monounsaturated, and polyunsaturated. And like most things in nutrition, dose matters, right? So when we're looking at saturated fats, we want to eat less of the saturated fats, right? Those are the ones that increase our LDL or bad cholesterol. They increase cardiovascular disease and cardiovascular events, right? So looking at reducing some of the fattier cuts of meat or cutting the fat off the meat, fatty processed foods, commercially prepared sweets and treats, fried foods, shortening margarine. Butter is a saturated fat, but there's nothing wrong with a little bit of butter. If you're having a couple of tablespoons a day, no problem. But really looking at the mono and the polyunsaturated fat intake, because that's what's associated with lower risk of cardiovascular disease and death. So we want to start to prioritize those foods. So think, nuts and seeds, seafood, fatty fish, olives, olive oils, nut butters. But again, remember, every gram of fat, no matter where it's coming from, has 9 calories per gram. So it's very calorically dense. So we do want to look at portions. We can't just, grab a giant handful of nuts a couple of times a day and be like, I'm eating healthy fats, right? If calories matter, then portion matters. If calories don't matter, knock yourself out, right? It's not the end of the world. So when we're looking at added fats, purely what we're adding to our diet, not what is already part of the food that we're already eating. So if you hold up your thumb, For men, about 2 thumbs are considered a serving, which comes out to about 2 tablespoons. 1 thumb is 1 tablespoon, and for women, it's about 1 thumb. So thinking about when you're adding your fats, also being mindful of the food you're already eating and how much fat is already included in some of those foods. So let's talk about exercise, which is the second pillar. Along with nutrition, movement is the most evidence-based thing that you can do to proactively impact every single aspect of your health. There is nothing that exercise and movement doesn't necessarily fix. And it only takes 30 minutes a day. You don't have to do 30 straight minutes. You can break it up into little movement, micro snacks. But exercise lowers illness risk, it strengthens our bones, helps control weight and body composition, lowers our risk of diabetes and cognitive decline. And again, remember in TDEE, structured exercise is only 5% of calories out. So yeah, it creates a little bit of caloric deficit, but we have to focus on diet and all of these things. But exercise for health, not to burn off calories. Now, I will say, if you are middle-aged, right, if you're like 40 plus, 35 plus, and you are not exercising in any sort of structured way, this is the time when you need to get serious about incorporating structured daily exercise into your daily routine. So the first piece of exercise is strength and functional training. And these are exercises and activities that build muscular and bone strength, and they mirror the activities of daily life. And I will say, in addition to protein, strength and functional training significantly supports muscle mass, mobility, and bone density. Because now, as we age, we need to focus on improving our gait, our balance, stability, because we do not want to become frail and fall. And we know, based on all these studies, that people with greater levels of muscle and strength have lower levels of chronic disease and diabetes. And in people with heart disease, those with the most muscle and the least body fat have 68% lower risk of dying from heart disease, right? And it's also a critical piece of longevity because I said earlier, as we age, we lose muscle mass. So this strength functional training, like combination, gives us the physical stimulus along with protein that we need to keep and build muscle and support a strong basal metabolic rate. So aerobic training, we need to get our heart rate up. So I'm talking about brisk walking, jogging, swimming, some of my spinning instructor, taking one of my spin classes, HIIT, anything that supports your cardiovascular health is fantastic. And aerobic exercise trains your body to move oxygen and blood to the muscles more efficiently, right? And if you take a group exercise class, extra bonus, because now you get the added benefit of community and social support and social interaction. And if I had to choose the fifth pillar, and if we had more time, I would talk about the value of social interaction for health and longevity. And when we're talking about how hard should I be working? Thinking about rate of perceived exertion on a scale of 1 to 10, focusing in on about a 4, right? You want a slightly elevated heart rate. You want to be able to speak in a full sentence, but you want your breathing to be slightly labored, right? You're able to carry on a conversation if you had to, but you might not want to. So flexibility and balance training is another aspect of exercise. And this is really important because it directly impacts activity-related parts of everyday life, right? And we want to make sure, guarding against stiff muscles, injuries, and falls, we will start to react poorly if we have a misstep or we trip as we age, right? So proprioception and postural adaptation starts to come into play because as we age, there are some physiological and skeletal systems that decline due to our ability to maintain postural control and balance, right? So we want to be able to be in a position where we are more proactive instead of reactive when it comes to balancing and steadying ourselves. So, yoga, Pilates, barre, Tai Chi, Bosu, all of those things are great ways to get flexibility and balance training in. So let's talk about movement, right? All exercise is movement, but not all movement is exercise. So earlier on, I talked about NEAT, non-exercise activity thermogenesis. And this is all of the calories we burn every day through basic movement, from fidgeting to blinking to, if you're somebody who jimmies their leg, sitting, watching TV or working, this is where this comes into play. And again, I said NEAT encompasses 15% of total daily energy expenditure. So it is one of the most impactful ways that we can manage weight, support a robust metabolism, and improve overall health. There was a 2015 study that showed those who had high NEAT had less metabolic syndrome, less cardiovascular events, and death from all cause of mortality. So one of the first things I work on with clients often is hydration, but another thing is just simple movement. At the end of the day, your NEAT ultimately burns more calories overall than a lot of the cardio most people are trying to do for fat loss, right? It's 63% of our day rather than the 4% of hopping on a treadmill for an hour. So you can start to optimize NEATs by just making more conscious decisions to move more throughout the day. Movement starts to become non-negotiable as we get older. So how do we start to increase our NEAT? Just take some micro movement stacks, right? Take breaks throughout the day and walk around, put a calendar reminder on. If you use a Fitbit or some sort of tracking device, you can put an alert on to ping you to move. You can set step goals. Even 15 minutes a day adds up to more steps. So choose the stairs, park farther away. If you're on a call, pace. If you're in a meeting and you're able to stand up and take the meeting. Use a standing desk if you can. Take stretch breaks. If you've got a pet, take the pet out for a walk. Increase your steps incrementally and use a tracker to help you meet your goals, right? Even vacuuming and chores, anything that you can do to get that movement up is going to be beneficial. So the last pillar is recovery. And when we're talking about recovery, I'm talking about it from the stress standpoint, because recovery is just as important as all of the work that you're doing to stay healthy. And stress and recovery are just two sides of the same coin, right? But the quicker and more efficiently that we start to recover from chronic and acute stress, the sooner we're able to spur progress and hit whatever goals it is that we're trying to hit. Because we cannot stop stress. It is going to happen, and it comes at us from every possible direction, whether it be life, work, relationships, money. People who diet and restrict calories, that's stress on your body. If you exercise a lot and you don't recover with recovery meals and you're not hydrating and you're not fueling, that is stress on our body. Poor sleep or disrupted sleep, this is all stress. And over time, this chronic stress starts to build, and then something has to go. So when we talk about recovery, I'm talking far more than just get more sleep and take a day off of the gym. This is more of a multifaceted, wide-ranging impact that has mental and physiological effects. And if you're somebody who's highly active, if you're overtraining, under-recovering, chronically stressed, right? Eating and sleeping poorly, we're looking at now poor health outcomes, as well as ineffective workouts, injury, illness, and progress derailments. So when we talk about recovery, we're talking about 4 R's: refueling, rehydrating, repairing, and resting. And they are all equally important, because in this world we live in, we're constantly perceiving stress and constantly responding it. So the stress load, right? How much stress we have at any given time really does matter. It's sort of that dose response relationship where a little bit is good and healthy and needed for survival. We need some stress in our lives, but a lot is a problem that starts this cascade of negative metabolic responses. So the first piece of recovery is the nutrition piece, and that's the refuel, the rehydrate, and repair, right? Nutrition and hydration work together. So when I talk to clients about this, I sort of say, if you think of these things as 3 separate Legos and you snap them together, you have a really strong brick. So carbohydrates are critical for recovery nutrition, especially post-workout, hard workouts, people who work out, more than once a day, because they restore your immune function. They also replenish your depleted energy stores. When you work out really hard for extensive period of times, we store carbohydrates as glycogen in our muscles and in our liver, and those get depleted. So eating carbohydrates brings those levels back up. It helps reduce soreness. It gives your body vitamins and minerals. It helps with hunger and cravings. And it also improves your sleep quality. And sleep is a key to recovery. So people who restrict carbs at night, especially after nighttime workouts, you're getting this double whammy of restricting food, restricting nutrients, and potentially, promoting sleep issues. Hydration comes into play, whether that be water, juice, milk, electrolytes, a smoothie, because we want to lubricate our joints. And this helps improve our immune function. It reduces our risk of injury, promotes healthy cellular function, and it particularly replenishes all the fluids you lost through sweat, especially if you're somebody who sweats heavily. It also moves nutrients and oxygen through our body and regulates our body temperatures. So hydration, critical. The third piece of this trifecta is the protein, right? Protein is going to repair and rebuild your tissues, your cells, and your muscle while reversing the damage that you do from hard workouts, right? So it keeps our body in a state of growth and building, an anabolic state versus a catabolic state of breakdown. So it's synthesizing hormones, also helps with soreness, and makes sure we don't get injured. Rest, big piece of recovery, right? Rest equals gains. So it's really important that we are actively scheduling rest into our routines, right? And if we're highly active, there's passive recovery, which is, you need a true day off from your training or from the gym. Then there's active recovery. My clients know I joke around about these things sort of as, I call them crockpot workouts, right? Low, slow, easy, steady, very little heart rate response, right? It's calming and de-stressing. And this rest isn't just about physical recovery, it's also about mental recovery and addressing burnout from all the other stress in life. So when we rest, our risk of injury and illness goes down. Our physical and mental performance goes up. Our sleep quality improves. Our tissues and cells can grow and repair, and our hormone levels get restored. And all of those equal gains, right? Because we want to reduce fatigue, prevent burnout, and replenish our energy stores. So we can't eliminate stress, right? But we can add more self-care and more relaxing but energizing activities, because we want to start to tamp down that fight, flight, like immediate stress sympathetic nervous response. And we want to start to activate more that rest and digest response, that parasympathetic nervous response. So when we're thinking about de-stressing, right, from a state of constant distress, we want to focus on things like creative, spiritual, emotional, sensory, social, mental, and physical ways to bring down that response and elevate parasympathetic nervous system response, right? So things like meditation, yoga, 5 minutes of deep breathing, right? Self-care, like taking a hot shower, connecting with other people, getting out in nature, cooking or baking, listening to music, drinking a hot beverage. Being outside in nature is one of the best, most de-stressing things you can do for your body. It brings down your heart rate response. So all of these things really help you de-stress and lower your sense of distress. And then sleep. Sleep is the last piece of this puzzle. People are always like, what's the best hack for, life, for losing weight, for this? I'm like, sleep. You got to sleep. Sleep is a recovery rock star. It is the magical unicorn. So many people are constantly like Googling what's best for this, right? We need good quality sleep and we need durations. Without sleep, our mood is in the tank. Our ability to manage our emotions, not so great, right? We need sleep to improve our cognition, our concentration. It solidifies memories, helps us stay more attentive. It improves our mental and physical health and performance. And if you do have body fat or body composition goals, it helps us lose body fat and build lean tissue. The other thing that sleep does is regulate our hormones, and it helps keep hunger, appetite, and cravings and satiety all at the right levels, because when those are off, even just one poor night of sleep, you start to make really poor food choices. We start to crave the highly palatable sweets treats the people are like, I just want carbs. And by carbs, they don't mean I want a bowl of farro. They mean I want a donut, right? And then you eat the donut because you slept really poorly and your inhibitions are down. So not getting enough sleep or getting poor quality sleep is one surefire way to tank your recovery. And there are some interesting studies out there showing that people who slept 6 hours or less per night in their 50s and 60s and beyond were more likely to develop dementia in later life. So more research is coming out about why sleep is so critical. So pulling this all together and looking at recovery, your recovery routine doesn't have to be complicated, and it shouldn't be complicated. There's so much out there right now about, take a cold shower, take a cold plunge, sit in an ice bath, do this, do that. You don't need those things. You want to do things that are simple, things that you can fit into your life, right? We don't need the extremes. We just need to focus on the boring basics and balance, right? So if we think about the balance of stress and recovery as a giant tank, and that tank can be simultaneously filled up by a faucet, right? And that faucet is recovery, but it can also be drained with a spout, and that spout is stress. So to add more water to your tank, we want to plug the leak and decrease stress. If that's not possible, right? Then we need to turn up the faucet and add more recovery. Best case scenario, if nothing is quite working, then we need to figure out ways to come at both at the same time, right? How are we able to lower our stress while increasing rest and recovery, right? We want to find that Goldilocks, like just right place by lowering stress while also increasing rest and recovery. Questions. I know I just put a lot out there, but in a nutshell, we want to focus on high quality nutrition. We want to eat more protein. We want to stay hydrated. We want to move more and move well. Start where you're at. Think Meliora, just ever better, not perfection. With movement and exercise, start with things you like to do and things you have access to, and build on from there. And then focus on your stress management and your recovery so that all these great things you're doing all start to work together. Questions?
Melissa, that was great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
You talk quickly and you say a lot. So it's a lot to keep up with, but I do have some questions that have been coming in.
Sure.
The first one that I'd like to ask on behalf of someone is, how do you recommend quote unquote stacking behavior change? This person said she has a long way to go, or he or she, and wants to be sure that the change is sustainable.
Yeah. So everything I do, I am a habit-based nutrition coach. Everything I do is based on lifestyle and habit change. I focus on things, people should focus on things that are simple, strategic, sustainable, and supported. You want to find your lowest hanging fruit. So pick one area of your life that may need the most amount of work. And from there, what is the biggest rock that you can start to make progress on? Focus on one small thing, do it daily, do it consistently, and it will start to become solidified as a habit. And then once that sticks, and it could take 2 to 4 weeks to make that habit a new habit, then you add on the next thing. So for example, if somebody is focusing on fruits and vegetables, they know they don't eat many fruits and vegetables. Maybe you're focusing on one meal or one snack, and you're adding one fistful of vegetables to just one meal or one snack. That's it. One thing, do it for a few weeks. Then the next thing is maybe you can either add a second portion to that same meal, something that's a different color. Maybe if the first thing was broccoli, maybe if you're not keen on vegetables, you're adding just more broccoli. You're not even adding a second vegetable, right? Maybe the next habit is looking at a snack and you're replacing a donut with a fruit or a vegetable, right? And you're stacking that habit on, or you're focusing on the next meal and adding another serving of fruit or vegetable to that meal. But keeping things as simple as possible. People go off track and get discouraged and stop making progress when they try to do all the things. We can't do all the things. We have to just focus on one simple thing and nail it. That's really the best way to just make progress and get habits to stick.
Great. This is a two-part question related. Given that hydration is so important, first of all, does eating ice count towards hydration? And
Yes,
secondly,
it does.
Does adding lemon pose any risk, or is that okay too?
I love lemon. It tastes good. It's a great way to flavor your water. Depending on how much lemon and how often you're doing it, it could impact your teeth enamel. So I recommend drinking it with a straw to alleviate that. For some people, it could also cause some gastric distress or throat distress because it is very acidic. But otherwise, yeah, if adding lemon or any other flavoring to your water is going to help you drink water and you really like it, I love it, drink it. I will say people are like, it does nothing for anything else. There are no magical lemon properties in your water. It does not promote fat loss. It does not do any of the things that you see on social media. It's not detoxing. Those are all myths, but it tastes really good. And if it tastes good, you're going to drink it. So yeah, add lemon to your water.
So good way to start hydrating if you like it.
Absolutely.
Postmenopausal woman who has had to remove dairy from diet, can you recommend another good source of calcium?
You're probably going to have to start looking at supplements. I'm perimenopausal and I am dairy free, not by choice. I supplement because it's hard. It's hard when you can't get dairy. I mean, some fatty fish, some leafy greens have a little bit of calcium and vitamin D, but really you're now looking at supplements. If you're somebody that starts to track their food in some way, whether that be with a journal or in an app or in pictures, you could start to see where you're lacking. And if calcium and vitamin D is an issue purely because you have to remove something for your diet, then that's one reason that targeted supplementation might make a lot of sense. I have one client, she's actually on injections for osteoporosis too, that helps. So it's definitely worth a conversation with a healthcare provider. And again, if you know you're deficient, then that's a great time to think about targeted supplementation and work with your healthcare provider to talk about what levels make the most sense.
A follow-up that someone asked is almond milk has calcium added, correct? Is that true?
Yeah, some do. Yeah. I mean, I guess the other piece of that puzzle is when you're choosing foods, you can choose foods that are fortified, and many of them are. So I do drink almond milk. I choose the unsweetened kind. And I do look to see that it's got added vitamin D, added calcium, a lot of foods, breads, other things, looking to make sure that they are fortified with calcium and vitamin D does make a difference.
Two more questions so far. I know we're running short on time. So one is regarding protein intake. How do we determine quote unquote ideal body weight if we feel there is much extra weight we are carrying?
Yeah, that's kind of, that's a hard one. I think, we can start with, let's say someone weighs 180 pounds. And maybe their goal body weight is 150, right? Maybe it's more like a goal weight, or maybe it's even just 170, right? What is ideal to you? What do you feel good in your skin as? Because scale weight is kind of an arbitrary number, right? Most people, it's like, oh, I want to lose 10 pounds. And then it's like, okay, I want to lose another 10 pounds. And the goalpost keeps moving, right? So what is ideal body weight? So you need to figure out, what does that mean to you, both in terms of health and other issues that work for you when it comes to body weight and body composition. So, if I'm, again, just as an example, if you're 180, but your goal weight or your ideal weight is 150, then maybe you're taking the low end of that spectrum of 0.7 to 1 gram per pound of ideal body weight, right? 0.7 times 150 would give you an approximate place to start. It's still going to be pretty high, right? But not as high as if you did the math for 180, because it's already challenging to meet protein goals. And if now you're setting protein way, way, way high, you're setting yourself up for failure. And this is one of the things I work on with clients a lot. We work on this range because it isn't black and white, right? Same with calories. It's never just black and white, one or the other.
This one might be a little bit easier. Is it better to eat raw vegetables or cooked? Will cooking kill the nutrients?
Depends. I mean, cooking kills some of the nutrients, and some vegetables, it enhances the nutrients. So I always tell people, what do you like? Do you like raw vegetables? Do you like cooked vegetables? What matters is that you're eating more. So if cooking them is going to make you feel better and make you eat more of them, cook your vegetables. If you like to snack on raw vegetables, and eat the raw vegetables. If you have gut issues, like I have gut issues, raw vegetables, not so much. They really impact my gut in a negative way. I need to cook my vegetables more so that my body can process them better. So, don't get bogged down in sort of majoring in the minors. Really just focus on overall quality and adding more to your diet. If cooking them is going to help you eat more, cook your veggies. If you like snacking on raw veggies, eat some raw veggies. Listen to your body. If you're really bloated, if things aren't feeling so great, if you eat a lot of raw veggies, then cut back on the amount, or maybe start to cook some of them so that you feel a little bit better.
Can we sneak in one more question? It's 12:59.
Yeah.
Can you speak more, please, about plant-based sources of protein to eat versus avoid? For instance, are some more highly processed, like an Impossible Burger?
Yeah, again, everything it depends, right? So plant-based proteins, like I would choose a whole food approach over a highly processed approach, but sometimes you need options, right? So if you're not eating beef, you're not eating a burger that's meat-based, and eating the plant-based burger helps you meet nutrition goals and it keeps you satisfied and it adds variety to your diet, you have to balance what makes the most sense and what works for you. And looking at your plant-based proteins, what matters is that you're getting as much whole foods as possible, because I think the challenge comes into play where people start to restrict, whether that be for philosophical reasons, for health reasons, intolerances or allergies, whatever the reason is that you're not eating something, you have to then replace it with something else. And I think it gets tricky when people become vegetarians or vegans and they sort of like hack the system and find a workaround for that. And they replace everything with all highly processed versions of the foods that they took out, right? So if that's the case, how much better is your diet as a vegan, but eating mostly highly processed foods versus as someone who eats, an omnivore's diet with more whole foods, right? So you have to sort of weigh what works for you, what works for your lifestyle, what works for your budget, what fits your life, what your needs are, what your tastes are, what your preferences are. And you have to make choices based on all of those things. It's never black and white in nutrition. There's very few things in nutrition that are yes, no, do this, don't do this, black and white, don't eat this, eat this. It just, everything it depends. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's great. And I've seen a version of this presentation before, and this was equally, I could watch it again. Thank you, Louisa. I think we're sort of out of time. Lisa, do you have anything?
Thank you, Melissa, for sharing your knowledge with us today. And thanks everyone for joining. Please keep in touch with the Women's Network event. We have virtual breakfast monthly, and we have other programs quarterly. Sarah just posted some links in the chat to learn more about Melissa. Please take a look at those chats, and we also share resources with you in email and the recording. Thanks, everyone. Have a great afternoon.